Ever heard of a myth or claim from someone about something in Final Fantasy XIV that they clearly never tested or checked and would love to know the real answer? Welcome to Final Fantasy XIV Mythbusters, where we test, discuss, and compare all these wild claims to see what is true, what is false, and why. And be sure to leave a comment with a myth or claim you met in the comments, if you've met any. Number 1. Do bard songs stack? No, they don't. This is a relatively common question, partly because it is a very common situation in regular content. All it takes for the question to pop up is 2 bards appearing in the same party. Now, assuming both bards are playing optimally, or going beyond that, perfectly, they would be in the exact same song at the same time at any given point, and what they would see is that, indeed, everyone in the party would be benefiting from just one Wanderer's Minuet, or just one Mage's Ballad, or just one Army's Paean. On the other hand, if, say, one of the bards lagged behind on their songs, or alternatively, deliberately chose to start on a different song to try and provide double song buffs or some such, what instead happens is that the party will see the song buffs flip-flop back and forth between the 2 active songs. Exactly what happens is worth a proper test to demonstrate, and for this I have Aradel and Ivis, Raging Bull, to help me. For the first test, Aradel and I reset our MP to 0 to have a clear timer on the known 3-second timer that your passive MP recovery ticks on. We can observe here that my Mage's Ballad takes priority at a completely different timing to me recovering MP. The same applies for Aradel's Wanderer's Minuet, which indicates that the timing clearly has nothing to do with MP regen ticks. For the second test, we pay closer attention to the actual song gauge, as it looks like my Wanderer's Minuet takes over almost exactly on the 3-second timings on the song gauge itself. However, as we will demonstrate shortly, this is a red herring. Now, the way this works, for a bit more detail, is that whenever your song ticks, or essentially pulses its buff, it takes over until another bard song pulses its buff. This means that the buff we benefit from will always be the song that pulsed most recently. So if Aradel's song ticks 1 second after mine, my song will be in control for 1 second, while theirs get 2. Now, for the third test, we effectively try it again as a sanity check, and here we observe that my song refreshes completely disconnected from my song gauge ticks, probably disproving that it has nothing to do with the song gauge itself. Now, for the fourth test, the hypothesis is that the songs pulse in perfect unison with hot and dot ticks on the individual. These effects also tick every 3 seconds on each character in unison. However, this unison is unique to every character, meaning my 3-second hot clock is not the same as Aradel's, necessarily. We often don't really notice this because when zoning into duties, the characters all spawn in close to at the same time, making the clocks almost perfectly in sync. So for this test, Ivis will be maintaining a hot on us while we do the exact same test. Here you can see that it swaps to my song exactly when the hot tick appears on me, and it swaps to Aradel's song exactly when the hot tick appears on them. For 5th test, and also to sanity check the 4th one, we enter a duty which should at least ensure that our hot ticks are changed to a different timing, relatively speaking, but just in case the song pulses actually are on their own clocks. What we observe here is that now our hots tick almost in perfect sync, and my song only appears for a fraction of a second. My guess is that the reason why my song comes out first is that I happen to know that my PC may have been able to load into the zone a fraction of a second faster than Aradel's, which would start my hot ticks there, maybe. It is also possible they are perfectly in sync, and it just looks like that when that happens. So, in conclusion, bard songs, do they stack? No. The most recent song to pulse will be the one in effect, and exactly which one that will be is partly out of control of the players. Additionally, the relative power difference of the three songs is so incredibly minuscule that the bards themselves will probably lose more damage by doing some wacky song order optimization. And just as a final note, for those wondering about the rest, Battle Voice and Radiant Finale of course also will not stack. Number 2, fitting with this little theme, Dancer's standard finish. Do they stack? Yes and no. This is a pretty common one, so it bears repeating to get it just right. Dancer's standard finish grants the dancer itself and their dance partner two mechanically distinct but visually identical buffs. The standard finish buff the dancer gives itself I like to call the giver buff, as the dancer is the giving player in this instance. The dance partner instead receives the standard finish receiver buff, as they receive in this instance. Don't make it weird. Aside from them being labeled differently, they both increase damage done by exactly 5%. Now, obviously, it is impossible for one dancer to have even the opportunity to be offered more than one giver buff under any circumstances. However, because the giver and receiver buffs are distinctly different, a dancer can benefit from both of those. In the demonstration here, I started by using Windmill a bunch to establish base damage, then I used standard finish while partnered to Aradel, and we saw the damage increase. Then Aradel used standard finish while partnered to me, and we once again saw the damage increase. I also turned off my own damage buff and reapplied it to try and get some more test results and comparison points here. In other words, two dancers partnering each other will work. However, take note that Devilment still will not stack. Now, if you have a third player involved on the other hand, two receiver buffs will not stack, which we demonstrate here by having Ivis spam Dyscrasia. Once my standard finish is applied, the damage is increased. But when Aradel adds their standard finish, nothing changes. In fact, an additional thing you can note is that Ivis has two S-play buffs, which is what causes me and Aradel to sometimes generate S-play from Ivis' attacks, but Ivis only has one standard finish damage buff, which should be all the evidence we need. Also, just a quick aside that we also ended up testing just to be certain, no one-step standard finish receiver does not stack with a regular two-step standard finish receiver. What is mildly humorous though is that they will always override each other, which means, I guess, you can replace a standard finish receiver buff from another dancer with an inferior one-step one for only 2%. But it would also apply to yourself, so I don't see what you would gain from that. In conclusion though, dancer's standard finish only stacks in the exact specific case where it is two dancers partnering each other. In all other cases, you can only have one receiver buff at a time. Number 3. If you use rescue during the animation lock of a limit break, you can cancel the animation lock so the player can move again. False. The idea here is that if you rescue someone while they're in the middle of a limit break animation, they fully stop performing their animation with the character and get shoved over to the healer, of course, which should mean that they can now move, right? Not quite. In the process of a limit break, you have the cast time, sometimes, a slight cast moment just before the cast ends, and then you are locked in, as it were, until the animation is fully finished. If you perform the limit break while holding a movement key from the start of the slide cast window until the very end of the animation, you will be able to tell how much time you cannot move. This exact same testing process can be used while incorporating rescues to cancel the animation. What actually seems to happen is that the character just exits the animation while the animation itself somehow continues undisturbed. So for the test, we'll be using the Viper limit break, the Astrologian limit break, and the Gunbreaker limit break. For the Viper limit break, you can see right here that Evis rescues me right as the animation lock begins proper, yet despite me holding a movement key, nothing happens until the exact frame where the limit break is fully finished. For the Astrologian limit break, you can see that Aradel rescues me so early that I didn't even get a chance to slide cast, and yet I am still locked in and cannot move until the animation is fully finished, if not a bit beyond that. For the Gunbreaker limit break, it is worth remembering that tank limit breaks don't even have a cast time, so there is simply the animation log itself. For the first demonstration, Evis rescues me once the buff is fully applied, and yet I still cannot move until the animation is fully finished. For an additional test, we also tried to see what happens if you rescue before the tank limit break buff is applied, and same result, although I got rescued like 1 frame before the buff applied. In conclusion, rescue does not allow you to weasel out of the animation lock of a limit break. Rescue does, however, work on someone locked into a limit break, which can be helpful if a limit break is being used and the user is stuck in an incoming attack as a result. Also, a really random sidebar here we also discovered. Did you know that DPS limit break 3 generates one point of enmity? I can see why, as in the past, one player suddenly generating a humongous amount of damage might cause enmity problems, but it still seems a bit weird. Number 4. Do movement speed buffs stack? No. This one is uniquely weird, especially in relation to the Dancer and Bard myths we covered here. The way movement speed buffs work is that you can have various different buffs all at once, no problem. One ninja could realistically have both its Fleet of Foot passive, Peloton, Sprint or Jog, and Expedient all at once. I will leave that one up for you to test on your own though. However, among all those effects, the ninja would only be running 30% faster, as that is the benefit provided by Expedient and Sprint. In other words, the way speed bonuses work is that you can only ever benefit from one at a time, and which one you benefit from will be whichever one that provides the biggest bonus. The most effective way to demonstrate this is to find a very strict linear path to run down, see how long it takes to run it with no bonuses, see how fast it is with a 10% bonus like Fleet of Foot, then again with 20% like Peloton, and then again with 30% like Sprint. After that, a simple test is to attempt the run again with, for instance, Peloton and Sprint, and observe that the time is essentially the exact same as for just Sprint on its own. A much weirder question to answer is how exactly speed bonuses stack with speed slows, and hands in the air, I'm not sure, but my initial impression is that when you're affected by a heavy debuff slowing you down, it seems to stack multiplicatively with your move speed, and the speed bonuses do the same, meaning that if you had a 50% heavy effect and sprint, you should be running at about 65% speed. However, I am not sure on this, and I do not find it very easy to test, as you would both need to produce a heavy debuff and have a clear path to run down after receiving it. If you have any ideas for a way to easily test this one, please do let me know in the comments. That said, I know of at least one weird exception here, which is when you become really small in the P12S Phase 2 fight. Here, Sprint seemingly makes you run super fast, relatively speaking, which gives me the impression that either speed increases in general might be additive, or that particular slow is additive, and so is subtracted from the speed you have, leading to this weird interaction. A final little aside on this topic is that if speed bonuses did stack additively, then a Pixelmancer benefiting from the Smudge speed bonus while using Sprint and benefiting from Peloton and Expedient would be running 110% faster than normal run speed. The base run speed is about 6 yalms per second, meaning this would be 12.6 yalms per second. If the speed bonus is stacked multiplicatively, this would instead be 164% faster than normal, leading to 15.8 yalms per second. reaching a point where you can possibly keep pace with, or even outrun, some of the actual job action dashes. Number 5. Inner Release also makes the healing from Bloodwhetting guaranteed to crit. False. Warrior has an interesting interaction with Bloodwhetting in that it is capable of ensuring that the heals also crit. However, this interaction has nothing to do with Inner Release. Or, well, at least not directly. The way it works is that if an attack is inherently guaranteed to critical hit, then things reliant on it will also crit. That's a vague yet very specific description, but as it turns out, there is only one job that can actually make use of this weird interaction, which is Warrior. Bloodwhetting causes you to heal every time you connect a weapon skill to an enemy. This heal can crit separately from the attack itself, with its own crit chance. However, if an action that inherently auto-crits is used, then the healing is also guaranteed to crit. This specific interaction is limited to Inner Chaos, Chaotic Cyclone, Primal Rend, and Primal Ruination in Warrior's toolkit, as these 4 actions are the ones in the Warrior arsenal that inherently crit. The misconception comes about in assuming that the Fell Cleaves or Decimates during Inner Release would also have this effect, which they will not. To demonstrate that the interaction does not work, all we need is to have one instance of an Inner Release boosted attack be accompanied by a non-critting Bloodwhetting heal. This would also be how you disprove my initial explanation that it does have this interaction with inherently auto-critting attacks. However, I do not think you actually can get one non-critting Bloodwhetting heal out of an Inner Chaos or a Chaotic Cyclone. A funny detail about this interaction is the fact that certain other jobs have part of the equation to make use of this interaction too, but lacking one of the elements makes the whole thing impossible. Machinist, Dancer, and Samurai, for instance, have inherently auto-critting attacks. Pictomancer does too, but not the ability to cause using actions to heal you in the same way that Bloodwhetting does. Sage's Cardia is similar in functionality to Bloodwhetting. Not the same, but similar. But Sage does not have access to any actions that inherently auto-crit, making this interaction untestable from that angle too. Dark Knight's Walking Dead is basically Bloodwhetting with a hat on it, but as Dark Knight does not have any auto-critting attacks, that one is a dead end too. Remember, if you have a myth or a claim you would like to see explained or tested, be sure to leave a comment down below. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Shadowbringers, Enmity was not nearly as easily attained, even by tanks. In fact, DPS and even healers had access to role actions that would temporarily or even permanently reduce their enmity to be sure they didn't overtake the tanks. However, limit breaks are not affected by buffs on you under any normal circumstances, so we can probably assume the enmity generated by a limit break would be unaffected too. Imagine if such a limit break hit a boss and now your DPS has fully caught up with the tanks. Probably not as bad as it sounds, but still probably explains why limit breaks do 1 point of enmity.